Welcome to Keto Life Support, where we make your keto life sustainable, fun, and low stress. I'm Kim Howerton, and I'll be coming to you weekly with some of my keto besties to bring you the practical, real-world keto advice that you need. Quick disclaimer, I am not a doctor, and even if we do have a doctor in the house from time to time, he or she is not your doctor, and nothing we say on this show should be taken as medical advice. Always check in with a trusted medical professional about your own personal medical concerns.
Hello and welcome to Keto Life Support. This is Kim Howerton with episode number 169. And today we're doing another Q&A. I know I've been doing a lot of them recently. I got a lot of questions and they perked a lot of thoughts. So I'm just jumping off with those. Specifically today, we're going to talk about, I got a bunch of questions that were very similar. So I'm going to kind of condense them into one question, which is, what do you do if you don't really cook, but you want to eat better and you want to lose weight? And, how do you manage that if you're not somebody that cooks? So I'm going to go through some different options today that I've experimented with that I think can work for most people. And we're going to go from there. The first thing I would say is there's a range here, right? From I don't want to do anything but reheat. I guess I don't even want to reheat. I just want to be able to eat directly from a bag, right? It's a far end, and then we kind of it's a gradation that we go down to. It's okay, I'll cook some real simple stuff. And along the way, there are different stops along the way. And I'm going to kind of try and take you through some of the different options because I want people's lives to work. And do I think that cooking is one of life's greatest pleasures? Yes. Do I think everyone agrees with that? Absolutely not. Do I think that learning to cook is actually a pretty important step on having a sustainable long-term health journey? I think it makes it a lot easier. And I think that when you don't cook, you tend to sometimes make choices like getting takeout or ordering Uber Eats or whatever. You're basically ordering a lot of restaurant food. And restaurant food is very hard to control in most settings, most restaurants, in terms of being really specific about what's getting put in your food and quantity and this and that. So it's a lot less tightly controlled. I'm not against eating out, but if you are somebody that wants to really make a change in terms of your health, you need to be eating foods that are repeatable, understandable. If you go to a restaurant and you order fried eggs, right? The way somebody would make them at home is with a couple teaspoons of butter. The restaurant, they may have a couple tablespoons, right? You don't know that. And I'm not saying that one is bad. Butter is lovely. I love it. But if you don't know, it's going to be kind of sometimes hard for you to track. And you'd be like, I'm not losing weight. And I think I should be losing weight because I logged eggs in my macro tracker. And but it's but you actually had eggs and 4 tablespoons of butter, right? And so restaurants can make this hard. Some restaurants are better at being precise and tailoring their choices towards a crowd that is health conscious. But what I'm going to say is today I'm going to try and focus on suggesting that eating out or restaurant food or takeout food should be a minimal part of your diet. Can it be included? Absolutely. And I will go over some safer and less safe choices and how to order your food that might help you be more precise. But on the far end of, I don't really want to do much work, we've got what are generally called meal prep companies. Now, there are a ton of meal prep companies out there. 2 of the ones that I have tried and I enjoyed were Trifecta and Factor 75. There are pluses and minuses and adjustments with each. Now, I've tried a bunch of other different services, some of whom seem to have gone out of business and almost immediately after I tried their services. They were new companies. They're try our stuff. And a month later, I was where'd they go? Anyway, so we've got some options here, but I'm going to talk a little bit about Trifecta and Factor 75, because those were the ones that I like the best. Now, Trifecta was started and is more geared towards sort of a crowd that I would call more like gym people, like CrossFit people. Do you have to do CrossFit to get trifecta? No, but they're very sort of oriented in that. Like a lot of their advertising feels like that's a CrossFit gym they took that picture in. So you basically go to their website and there's a quiz if you don't know which kind of meal plan you might want, but you can choose what they call the clean meal plan, which is kind of somebody might call a balanced meal plan. Like as an example, a meal might be a sweet potato, chicken, and broccoli, right? Then there's the paleo meal plan. What's the difference between those two? I think the paleo has a little bit more fat. So as an example, their example picture there is some sweet potato, some beef, and some broccoli. They really like broccoli at Trifecta, I'm going to tell you. There's the Whole30 meal plan, which all the meals follow the Whole30 rules. And there's a keto meal plan. Now, obviously, with all of these different meal plan companies, what they're calling keto, where they draw their line on the carbs, can vary. And if I remember correctly, the keto meal plan looks like you choose whether you want so entrees would be what I would call appropriate for lunch or dinner. And then there are also breakfast options. So under the keto meal plan, I'm seeing that the average calories are just under 500, average protein grams 38, carbs 12, fats 33. So I found the macros on these meal plans pretty good. For lunch and dinner type entrees, you were getting things like salmon with vegetables and cauliflower rice. You could get like a beef stew, but that just had keto friendly type vegetables, stir fries without rice. So there were pretty good options on Trifecta, in my opinion. If you did 7 breakfasts and 14 entrees, so 3 meals a day for a week, you'd be looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of, I would say, around 14 to 1500 calories with around 100 grams of protein, maybe a little more. And carbs would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 35. I think that's total grams, and fat somewhere around 100 as well. So for a lot of people, a totally appropriate way to lose weight. If you're somebody who, say, has a lower food intake need than that, you could cut your lunches in half and have a small lunch instead of a bigger lunch or something like that. You can choose to order fewer. You could do, 5, 7, 10, or 14 entrees. So you can change it out. You can also say things like, I don't like nuts or mushrooms or pork or fish or whatever. So you can exclude certain ingredients if you don't like them. And so a full week's worth of meals, 3 meals a day, comes out to $272.79. I think that's before tax, but we'll just go with that. And let's look, $272.79 divided by 21. So that works out to about $12.99 a meal. So is that more expensive than you would pay if you were cooking? Yes. But if you factor in your time and how long you spend on cooking and shopping and all that kind of stuff, it's not that bad a price. Also, you could choose to leave out the breakfasts and just have 2 entrees, right? You can adjust it a little bit. Now, what do I think about the food quality? I feel like the quality of Trifecta's foods was really good. Some of their food combinations were a little weird. The vegetables got a little bit repetitive, and it honestly was a little boring. Food was a little boring, but it wasn't bad. And so if you're somebody who I like simple food, I like clean ingredients, I like easy, Trifecta is a great choice. So let's talk about Factor 75. Factor 75 offers a range of choices as well. They offer keto, they offer higher protein, they offer calorie smart. So the way they put their meal choices is a little bit different. You don't just choose from a meal plan, right? You can choose individual meals. So let's say, you wanted to choose a meal that was keto, you You could look through all the meals and it tells you which ones are keto, which ones are low calorie, which ones have less carbs. And so you can pick and choose meal by meal rather than just picking a meal type. And they tell you every week what is the menu for the week. So you could be like, oh, the spicy poblano beef bowl looks good, but I'm not super into the black pepper and sage roasted pork chop, right? So there's a lot more selection. Eric, my boyfriend, and I felt like we were ordering from a restaurant. Like the quality of the food was like good takeout quality. The meals were more interesting. They were more flavorful. But I will say that the keto meals were a little lower in protein than I like and a little more caloric than I like. So like as an example, if I go to, I'm just going to choose one of these meals as an example that's coming up. They vary a little bit, but jalapeno lime cheddar chicken with spicy cilantro cauliflower rice. The calories on that were 630 with 46 grams of fat. The carbs were 11, total protein 43. So actually this one, not bad. So, but there was some variation. They weren't all about the same. Let me see if I can find one. So like here's one that came in pretty high. This one is 820 calories. The cheesy bacon ranch shredded chicken with portobellos and garlic broccoli. The calories of this one were almost double the factor. We've got we got 14 grams of carbs. It's a little bit higher carb because it's got the cauliflower, portobellos, and broccoli, but not super high. The protein is 48 grams, so a good amount of protein. So you can pick and choose which ones you want. But, what we did with the factor meals is when they seemed a little high, like this one, the 820, instead of having each of us have our own meal, I split this one. So I got 2 meals out of it and gave half to my boyfriend and I ate half. So you can do certain things like that. So if you're somebody, I would say, who's like, I just like my food to feed me, it meets the needs, I'm happy with it being healthy, well-sourced, quality food, Trifecta is a great option. If you're a little bit more picky about your food, you want to pick and choose the meal, and you want better tasting food and better texture, like just overall less like meal prep, more like you went and picked up takeout, then I would say go with the factor ones. So you've got options here either way, whichever one sort of speaks to you. I would, if you're thinking about this, go to their websites and poke around. So I forgot to tell you what the cost was on Factor. So I have to select a week. So let me do that and then I will tell you. Okay, so if I chose 14 entrees and 7 breakfasts with Factor 75, that came out to $252.91. Now, as I said, with Factor, there were a few meals that I wanted to spread out over 2 meals. So I might actually even reduce my entrees by 1 or 2. But just for comparison's sake, you can see that Factor is about $253, whereas Trifecta was about $273. So about $20 difference, not a huge difference. As I said, Trifecta, very eatable, not objectionable, but my boyfriend and I both sort of by the end of the week were like, I'm really tired of this vegetable. The same vegetable kept coming up, and what more like Factor, we were like, or Factor 75, we were like, that's amazing. That we like literally out of a lot of meals had like one that we were like, that one was a myth. They were all almost always pretty darn good. So that's 2 of the options. Now, obviously, the less work you have to do, the more you have to pay. So those are not the cheapest options for sure. They are the easiest. Literally, they arrive at your house prepackaged in their meals. You pop them in the fridge. When you want to eat one, you pop it in the microwave for like 2 minutes, and then you open the container and you can eat it out of the container, or you can be a civilized human and put it on a plate. That's like all the work that needs to be done. They're just ready to go. Now, I will say that Trifecta does have an option where you can just order all your cooked meat from them. So you can literally just order a bunch of chicken breasts and some sirloin and some whatever. And so like all these cooked meats come. If you're not somebody that really cares that much about vegetables, or you're like, I can throw a bag of frozen vegetables in the microwave now and again, some cauliflower rice or some broccoli or some whatever, and I'm okay with that degree of doing things, right? It's not really cooking, it's just assembling. Then that's also an option there. So moving on from there, let's talk about what you can buy at the store. At almost every store, there are options for keto and or low carb meals that don't require cooking. A brand that is really easy for go-to for a lot of things is Real Good Foods. So they have things like chicken nuggets, cauliflower tot things. They got breakfast sandwiches. They got pizzas. They got enchiladas, and all of them are pretty low carb. And so they're in most grocery stores. They're in Costco. You can order things from them online. That's an easy go-to for a lot of meals. Would I be happy eating that every meal all the time? No. Is it helpful for me to have in my freezer for emergencies? Yes. Then there are things like breakfast sandwiches without the bun from like a company called Red's. If you just poke around, breakfast frittatas, poke around the frozen food section, there are definitely options to get. So those are available. Then there are things that are just super easy if you're a simple soul, like buy lunch meat, buy hard-boiled eggs that are already cooked. Those all exist. So really, I would say spend a half an hour going up and down the aisles of your grocery store, and you'll probably find there are a ton of lower carb options that you can easily eat and enjoy. So to answer the question, do you need to cook? No. Do you need to be conscious around your food? Yes. But if you're really like, I'm just hands off and I want somebody else to handle this for me, I would probably recommend a meal delivery service. Now, I said that I was going to talk about options for eating out. And there are. Chipotle is totally doable. As I said, they scoop things with a spoon. Some people scoop things with a spoon that's very generous. Some people are a little stingier. So your results may vary in terms of exactly how much you're getting of everything. And that can make things a little challenging. But if it's a minimal amount that you're going out like that, it's not going to affect things significantly. Or if you're doing it a lot and you know the people and you're like, I want this much, I want that, I want like, give me a little less, give me a little more, watch them as they're doing it and make sure it's an appropriate amount. And so Chipotle is a great option. There are fast food places that can be a useful option. Even going to like Wendy's, getting the bunless burgers, just getting burger patties. There are several fast food places you can do that with. Going to diners and ordering eggs. Hey, a trick if you want eggs, but you don't want them cooked in butter and you don't want to worry about that, you can always ask for them poached, in which case they're cooked in water, right? So there are options. I would avoid omelets unless you know exactly the details of what's in the omelet. Sometimes there are unknown fluffing agents, but you could certainly talk to them about what you're looking for. And that's my biggest thing. Unless it's like a fast food, easy, food's already prepared. If they're making your food from scratch, you can tell them how you'd like it. You can say, I'd like my eggs cooked this way, or I'd like my omelet made like this. Is that possible? Things like grilled hamburgers, when it's cooked on the grill, they're not adding a bunch of stuff to it, right? So there are absolutely options, but you're going to want to go more simple than more complicated. The more complicated the food is, the less you're going to be able to tell what's in it and how it was prepared. And it can be very surprising what they can put in things that you'd never think they would put in things. So I hope that helps with eating out. And so the answer is, don't let it hold you back. If you don't want to be somebody that cooks a ton, get some easy frozen options. Get some meal plans if you want to start with that. Because I know a lot of people might say, oh, that's pricey, $12, $13 a meal. And you can pick and choose. Maybe you're like, you know what? I know how to make eggs. I can make an egg. I'll make my own breakfast. I'll save money there. But I want these entrees, right? But it's done. You don't have to think about it. It's fairly easy. It's an option. Now, restaurants. Stores such as Trader Joe's also might be of interest. I know there's not a Trader Joe's everywhere, but they have some pre-prepped meal options or pre-made food options. Like you can get a very tasty little roast. It's just a beef roast that's already cooked and already sliced. That's available. They have fajitas, chicken fajitas in the pre-prepped section where it's just all the inner stuff. So it's like some vegetables and chicken is what it is. So it's just like the inside of a fajita, but that's a really easy option. So there's pre-cooked pork belly. It doesn't look very appetizing when it comes out, I'll tell you, and it needs a little reheat. But, there are several pre-cooked options available at places like Trader Joe's. And, those are easy and go too. Now, obviously, the more I get into like different kinds of products you could get, the more we get into a fuzzy area where I'm not sure if they're the best option. Like, Legendary Food makes keto Pop-Tarts. The good news on those is I have seen in many cases that there's zero or very low blood sugar response. So if you're just trying to keep your blood sugar low, you've got type 1 diabetes maybe, you don't have any other health issues, you're just trying to manage your blood sugars, an occasional use of those, big deal? No, absolutely not. Great that they're on the market. Are they something that is like super satiating and filling and is going to fill you up and totally help you with your diet goals? For the most part, no. So I'm not a big fan of a diet full of highly processed foods because they're just not satiating enough. There's too many complications with them. And so a lot of this sort of snacky stuff, I don't even want to go into. I'm just trying to say, like, how do we feed you some decent meals, even if you don't cook? Another option is to hire someone to cook for you. I know it sounds very, very fancy, but, you can compare and maybe you have a friend that cooks and you're like, hey, I'll buy all the groceries for both of us if you'll cook the meals and drop them off. You can make some, low carb lasagna for you or different kinds of stuff like that. If you know somebody else that loves to cook, it may actually come out slightly cheaper than a meal service. So just some options for you there. I hope this gave you a little bit of some food for thought about what kind of foods you can be eating. And I hope you enjoy, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Keto Life Support. Want more information? Want show notes? Want to suggest a topic? Just head over to ketolifesupport.com. That's where all that kind of thing can go on. By the way, I have a request. If you could go to your podcast host and hit subscribe, we would really, really appreciate it. And what would be even more awesome is if you could write a review. And what would be even more awesome than that is if you could write like a really flattering review. Just asking, you do you. All right. So thanks so much for joining us. I'm thrilled that you're part of the Keto fam. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.